Have you ever really thought about gold confiscation? I mean, would it ever happen? Could it ever happen? We know that there's been a history of that here in this country. I mean, America at one point did require everyone to not hoard anymore, turn in your gold, bullion, coins, that kind of thing, right? So it's happened before. But even then, the circumstances were different, right? I mean, people trusted the government more. People were a little bit more patriotic as far as, making the sacrifice for the government as opposed to, hoping the government does what you want. Now, one thing I've been thinking about as far as, is it potentially feasible that gold does get confiscated, that it does become, again, illegal to transact in gold or to hoard gold? And I thought, as ridiculous as it may sound, some of the things that are going on right now make it much more likely. Now, first and foremost, this whole thing with Trump and the birthright citizenship and this and that, a lot of this is just the usual fun and games, right? Until it's not. So one thing, as I understand it, with the whole birthright citizenship thing is, the president can say, or the president is saying that, they're going to examine birthright citizenship and, what does it really entail, as opposed to just being born on U.S. soil. What, do you have to be a citizen? Is it only for citizens? What are the specific parameters? And so, obviously this has come up before and, it's been ruled unconstitutional that, you basically, anybody born here, physically born here, whether, regardless of your parent status, is a citizen. That's kind of, how it's been for the last, 150 years. Now, the question there is like anything, right? It's you got to extrapolate these things further out. Okay, not so much about the birthright citizenship thing, but take that a step further as far as, what they're currently saying. In other words, a judge can't, interpret the Constitution and say, hey, no, this is, unconstitutional, and basically block that from happening, for everyone. It basically has to, be jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So in other words, state by state, realistically, to say, hey, we're challenging that ruling and, we're not going to enforce that here, or whatever. Now, take that for something like gold. Hey, what if the president decrees that gold, you can't hoard gold? Even more, what if the president says you can't hoard weapons or a specific type of weapon? Again, it's a slippery slope once you start going down that road of, it's an interpretation. And, if the president interprets it one way, well, the only way that you can get around it is if your locality challenges, that decree from the president. And then, it has to go through litigation or whatever. Why would gold, be potentially a target for, confiscation or, make it illegal? And I think one of the crazy things that came to, that I thought of, which was crazy, is what if this whole push towards crypto actually leads to gold being outlawed? What if this whole push towards crypto, there becomes a stable coin of some sort, let's say government backed, that needs to be backed by gold again, right? And so wouldn't that be very ironic if, stackers, for example, the ones who are always saying, I want something backed by, physical metals. What if the end game here was that, the new U.S. stable token or, cryptocurrency, Fed coin, whatever it's going to be, whatever iteration it takes, is actually backed by gold. But then as a result of that, at some point, they come for your physical ownership of gold and they make it illegal to transact in physical gold. No more buying and selling of gold. No more any of that. Now, again, as with anything, right? There's going to be people who say, well, that could never happen. Well, never say never, because a lot of things are happening right now that people said was never going to happen. But further, again, like the other hard part as far as like, could this ever happen is, what about jewelry? What about other stuff that requires gold? Well, of course, there's going to be exceptions. There's going to be loopholes. But for the physical trading of bullion, again, one of the things that I saw was, again, and they always say this, right? China's stacking up on gold, China's stacking up on gold, this and that. Now, prior to Trump's term, I would have said no. The reality is the dollar, again, is typically the best dirty shirt in the hamper, right? With regard to, knowing what you're going to get, understanding the value of, what it is. Again, the dollar's not perfect, but at the end of the day, you kind of knew what to expect. Now, in the Trump era, I think a lot of that's been diminished. And I'm actually very shocked at how quickly it's kind of happened. Can it come back? Maybe. I don't know. But I do feel like, we've really burned some bridges, and we've pushed, countries in another direction. Many other directions, to be frank. One of those directions is China. And it's funny to me that, Trump talks about like, oh, China's our enemy. He's probably done more to push other countries and a lot of the world towards China, because he's made China seem much more trustworthy at the end of the day. Again, China at this point is very similar to the US in that, they're going to do what's in their best interest at the end of the day, right? I mean, that China's going to do what's good for China. And that, your other country's interests may be aligned with that as far as, we both get something out of it. But, prior to this year, I would have said, no, the dollar has that staying power. I don't think we've ever been closer, in my lifetime at least, to where, another power kind of taking financial dominance has been a realistic possibility. And it's kind of crazy. Like I said, that coupled with, this whole tech bro thing really focusing on, cryptocurrency, crypto. It really is kind of crazy. I mean, when you think about it, like how many players are in here and how many, people have their hand in the cookie jar, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, all these people who, they may be, what's the euphemism, like bedfellows of convenience, but the reality is that their interests are not necessarily aligned, and so at some point there will be the power struggle to see who comes out on top on this thing, and when they do, what's their real agenda? What are they trying to get out of this? Because make no mistake, they're all in there for something, right? They're not out there to help people. They're there for whatever it is that they want. And it's pretty alarming, even for something like silver and gold and that kind of thing. Again, all it takes is something like that, a stable coin or a new Fed coin, to be backed by, government, by, gold, whatever. And the paradigm changes, the status changes to where it's like, hey, yeah, you can trade in gold, you can collect gold, you can have whatever. It's a free country, to, hey, you know what? That's not allowed anymore. And we're not going to let you do that. I don't think we've ever been closer to that. It may sound crazy, but with everything going on, I mean, I think it's more of a reality than it's ever been. Particularly, like I said, and as crazy as it is, like how pissed off would stackers be if, gold, owning physical gold in mass, like let's say anything over an ounce or something completely arbitrary. But let's say that was the case. If that became illegal, how ironic would it be that cryptocurrency would become the reason for that, or the impetus for that happening? It's pretty crazy. And like I said, like to follow that down from something like what's going on with the whole anchor babies and this and that, which I find ironic, since Trump's son is an anchor baby. It's crazy to me, like, but again, there's one rule for you and one rule for me. That's kind of how it is, like, and the thought's been there for a long time, but never take it for granted that we have the ability to have these things, but that can be taken away very quickly. And like I said, like, where my mind went with this whole argument is just, again, the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, having the weapons, as the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay, it says who? If the president says, let's just take all these arms away and we'll fight it out in court, but we're gonna take them first. Who wins there? Oh, well, if they come for my guns, Really? If you see the way that ICE is operating with these, the cool guys with the military surplus, if they show up in force like that, okay, well, great. If you're the person who's going to stand there and try to shoot it out with them, okay, I mean, if you want to be the David Koresh, go ahead. But I mean, you're not going to win that battle. These are guys just going in there, getting paid to go, round you up. They're going to do it. They're going to do it. They don't know any better. So we'll see, but it is an interesting thing to think about.